They say Hollywood never lets its legends rest. For most people, the name Jane Russell calls to mind glamour, golden age movies, and the sultry screen presence that made her unforgettable. But for those who live near her former Beverly Hills home, there's another story whispered late at night, one that doesn't appear in magazines or film reels. It begins with the sound. Neighbors claimed that, months after Jane passed away, her Mediterranean-style house seemed alive in the dead of night. Windows would rattle though no wind was blowing. A faint melody, a woman humming an old jazz standard, drifted across the lawn when the streets were otherwise silent. People walking their dogs swore they saw lights turning on inside, even though the house had been vacant. When a young couple finally purchased the property, they thought the rumors were nothing more than Hollywood gossip. The house, with its arched doorways, lush garden, and sweeping staircase, was a dream home. Yet within their first week, strange things began happening. They would wake to the smell of cigarette smoke, sharp, acrid, unmistakable even though neither of them smoked. The wife reported feeling watched in the vanity room, the same space Jane once used to prepare for premieres. The most chilling moment came one night around 2 a.m. The husband, restless and unable to sleep, walked into the living room and froze. Sitting in the corner chair was the faint outline of a woman in a dark gown. Her head tilted as if listening to music no one else could hear. Her presence wasn't violent, but it wasn't peaceful either. The moment he flicked on the light, she vanished, leaving behind the lingering scent of old perfume. Word spread quickly. Visitors to the house spoke of cold drafts brushing past them in hallways, mirrors fogging as though someone had just breathed against the glass, and a disembodied female voice singing softly near the grand piano. Contractors hired for renovations sometimes quit on the spot, saying tools went missing or voices whispered their names when no one was around. Locals believe Jane never left. Some say she wanders the home because it was where she felt most herself, away from the cameras, away from Hollywood. Others suggest she's protective, unwilling to let new owners alter the home she cherished for decades. One thing is certain. The haunting of Jane Russell's house has turned a once glamorous mansion into one of Los Angeles's quietest legends. Those who've been inside agree it isn't just a house. It's a stage where the final performance never ended. In the Golden Hills above Beverly Hills, hidden behind wrought iron gates and walls of ivy, stands a Mediterranean-style mansion once owned by one of Hollywood's brightest stars, Jane Russell. To the outside world, Jane was a symbol of elegance and allure, a woman who captivated millions on screen. But behind closed doors, her home became the center of whispers, the kind of stories neighbors only told when the sun went down. The mansion itself was beautiful in a quiet, time-worn way. Cream-colored stucco walls, arched windows framed in dark wood, and a red-tiled roof that caught the late afternoon sun. The front steps led to a heavy oak door, polished by decades of hands pushing it open. Inside, the air carried a faint trace of perfume, the kind of musky sweetness from a different era. After Jane's death, the house sat empty for months. Locals claimed it didn't stay quiet. At odd hours, lights flickered on inside, though no one had keys. Passers-by swore they heard music drifting out of the second-floor windows, a woman's voice humming softly, as though practicing lines from an old film. Others claimed the garden smelled faintly of cigarette smoke at night, curling into the air from no visible source. When a young couple, Michael and Laura, finally bought the property, they dismissed the stories as typical Hollywood myth-making. They were thrilled to live where a screen legend once resided. On their first evening, they stood in the grand living room, looking at the carved fireplace and tall mirrors, imagining the glamorous parties that must have been held there. Everything seemed perfect, but perfection faded quickly. On their second night, Laura woke to a sharp smell of smoke in the bedroom. She shook Michael awake, certain something was burning. They searched every room, only to find nothing. The house was still, the air heavy and stale. The smell disappeared as suddenly as it came. Days later, Laura, alone in the vanity room, felt something shift. She was brushing her hair when the mirror fogged up as though someone had breathed across it. A faint outline appeared in the mist, the suggestion of a woman's face, older, tired, but watching her closely. She screamed, and when Michael ran in, the mirror was clear again. The couple tried to ignore it, but the incidents escalated. Every night around 2 a.m., they were woken by faint footsteps moving down the hall. Doors they swore were shut would creak open slowly. The grand piano in the living room, untouched since they moved in, would sometimes let out a single note in the middle of the night, low, deep, and vibrating through the floorboards. The most terrifying moment came when Michael, unable to sleep, walked into the living room one night. The shadows pooled thick in the corners, and there, in the old armchair, he saw her. A woman in a dark gown, her head tilted, her form faint but unmistakable. Her hands rested in her lap, her presence heavy and unmoving. For a moment, he thought she was watching him, but then realized she wasn't looking at him at all. She was listening to something. Music, a melody that only she could hear. When he flicked the light on, the chair was empty, but the faint scent of perfume lingered, mixed with the sharp sting of smoke. Word spread again. Only this time the stories didn't come from neighbors, but from those who dared visit. Guests described cold drafts sweeping across their shoulders, mirrors fogging without cause, and whispers of a woman's voice in the hallways. Contractors hired to renovate quit without explanation, muttering about tools moving on their own and voices calling their names in empty rooms. Laura began to unravel. She claimed Jane was watching her, jealous of her presence in the house. She avoided the vanity room entirely, locking the door and refusing to step inside. Michael tried to stay rational, but every night the footsteps grew louder, the piano notes sharper, the smell of smoke thicker. One evening, as Laura sat in the kitchen, she heard the radio turn on in the living room. Static hissed through the house before a low jazz tune began to play, something from the 1940s. She walked in slowly, her heart racing. The radio wasn't plugged in. She swore she saw a figure standing by the window, framed in the moonlight. A woman's silhouette. A whisper slipped into the air. "This is still my home." That was the breaking point. Within a month, the couple packed their things and left, abandoning the house they once dreamed of calling forever home. To this day, the mansion sits quietly, waiting for its next owner. Realtors never mention its history, but those who live nearby say the stories never stopped. At night, when the streets are still, they claim you can hear the faint hum of a woman's voice, haunting, melodic, drifting from the upstairs windows. Some say Jane Russell never left because she couldn't. Others believe she stays because she refuses to let go of the only place where she was truly herself. The truth lies inside those stucco walls, in the silence of its shadowed rooms. And those who have been inside agree on one thing: Jane's last performance never ended. It plays on, night after night, for those willing or unlucky enough to listen. Don't forget to subscribe and like if you liked this story.